Today's chat is brought to you by, well, all of your support. Through the patronage you provide the Focus Fire chat team through Podbean's crowdfunding, we are able to provide you with the weekly podcast as well as the website and other aspects of Focus Fire chat. If you have any interest in becoming a patron of the FFC, please be sure to visit our website and click on the support link. Even a single dollar helps, and for those of you who are already patrons, thank you again for your generosity. You may have heard the whispers of guardians gathering in the shadows, exploring the mysteries of this world and the worlds which surround us. We are all in search of truth. Sometimes we need to focus that search, focus that fire. And so we come together. Join us. Join the discussion. Welcome to Focused Fire Chat. Welcome back for episode 133 of Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on June 8th over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. As always, I want to give a big shout out to our live chat here with us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us once again. Our topic for tonight's episode is going to be a look at the new information we have about worm gods. But first, let's run through a quick introduction of those that we have on the show for you tonight. As always, this is your host, Blue Crew 86. Next up, we have our own master of social media, the one and only Green-Eyed Music Lover. Green, hope you're doing well. How has the week treated you so far?
I'm still pouting from the last couple of things you guys said before we went live with this. Guys, I'm getting picked on for picking New Monarchy on just one of my accounts. No, my week's been good. It's been real good. We won our first round. We're ready to go on for the next round for the PvP tournament. I'm doing good. I'm focused. I'm not dealing with your sarcasm and your shenanigans and the New Monarchy hate and the French fry hate. And
yes, you are.
Yes, you are. Did you just say the French fry hate? Is that what you just said?
You old men need to stop.
I don't know. This is what happens when you don't
I want to know why this translated into hatred of French fries. I don't quite see that connection there. Was it because we were talking
or something?
Yeah, was this because
you were saying that
Hideo's handing out Big Macs?
Yeah.
Oh,
because you're the color scheme.
Well, I mean,
it's like McDonald's.
It is the Golden Arches. I mean,
it's not the Golden Arches. God, you too.
Nope. This is our chat tonight. Actually, it's
harassing Green.
No, it's just about New Monarchy and why you should never actually do anything with them ever.
Beard's hijacking the show. We're not talking about worm gods anymore.
Nope, it's over. It's done.
You're over.
Fine. See ya.
Well, rounding out the usual team, we have the grizzly bearded cultivator of Spinfoil himself, Beard Grizzly. Beard, how are you doing tonight?
Well, I was doing good until Green had to ruin my night with things about New Monarchy and stuff.
I didn't start it.
Sorry.
You two started this. You two started this. I cannot get pinned for this. I am.
So yeah, my sass is just fine. That being said, I am very glad that it is Friday because I actually have a Saturday off tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
Not that I'm actually going to take a Saturday off because we all know me better than that. But that being said, I am very happy that it is Friday and I do not have to work with my coworkers tomorrow because that is a thing.
Coworkers are stupid. Sometimes.
They sometimes can be. They certainly are. Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. I'll go with that. Yes,
okay.
We'll go with interesting.
A challenge diplomatically. Last week we asked the community to rank the worm gods in terms of power. And Green, I don't know. Did we get any responses to that?
We got one. It was a little harder question, I think, and that was something that he called out on this. It's just you don't have enough information to really rank them 1 to 5, which is a totally fair question or fair statement. But it was from Calix_Martinez on Twitter, and he said, I would argue we don't have enough information on all, but if Xol feared Yule, then we can probably say Yule is more powerful than Xol. I guess Yule is the most powerful if Xol only feared it and not the others, that Xol feared Yule the most, which is a fair point. But we're going to get into kind of the Xol and Yule dynamic, because I wanted to talk a little bit about how certain worm gods ate on the flesh of the Leviathan in the Books of Sorrow, one of whom we actually met and killed. Ish. Made him gas all over the place. Let's say that. Because he just dissipated into a smoke cloud of toxic fumes.
Oh, man. Well, what do you... So since next week is kind of your fun one, do you have a question ready for next week?
I do, and this one's going to be an easy multiple choice. I say that easy air quotes because we're talking about the concierge files, or better known as the Fry files from the Mars terminals. And the question is what is the most important thing we learned from the concierge recordings on Mars? Is it A, about engram technology, B, exoscience, C, Rasputin's capabilities, or D, the Warsat network? Now, granted, there are 6 of those files, but some of them kind of go together a little bit, but I kind of just picked some of the major overarching themes. So, easy question for next week. What's the most important thing? And I say that laughing. What's the most important thing we learned from those Fry files? Good luck.
Good luck. Well, I know everyone here is actually looking I know we're looking forward to diving into the discussion that we have for tonight. So let's run through our standard intro notes and then we'll get right into it. In our last episode of Focus Fire Chat, we discussed Halo as a part of our monthly Extra Lore recap. If you ever miss an episode and would like to catch up, please be sure to check out FocusFireChat.com for archives, articles, and links to the other aspects of Focus Fire Chat. If you don't mind, please rate and, if you can, review a show on iTunes, Podbean, or whichever podcasting app you use to enjoy podcasts. Reviews are extremely helpful as they not only let us know what we can do better, but help us stay on the charts, which helps others find our amazing community. To those of you who have already taken the time to leave us a review, thank you. As many of you already know, Focus Fire Chat is a cross-community gathering where the intent is to offer a week-long, in-depth view of a particular subject from within the lore of Destiny and other games. This chat begins every Tuesday morning and runs until the following Tuesday, with topics decided by the group via a poll that begins every Friday and ends on the Tuesday morning of the new chat. Every Friday, at around 10 p.m. Central, we get together to stream a high-level summary of the previous week's chat for those who are unable to participate. Please be sure to also give some support to the other podcasts in the Guardian Radio Network, links of which can be found in our show notes or on our website. If you're a fan of lore in all its various forms, be sure to also check out thelorenetwork.com, where you can find a wide variety of some amazing content that covers a number of different titles and mediums. Our next chat is going to be a discussion on what we lovingly call the Fry Files, or the Concierge AI from the Clovis Bray facility. As always, please be sure to weigh in on the poll this weekend to let us know which topic you want to discuss after that. Links to that poll can be found on either Twitter, @FocusFireChat, or within our Discord server. With all this being said, here's Green with a high-level summary of tonight's topic.
I am Yule, the honest worm. Behold my passage. Behold my vast displacement, my ponderous strength, my great and coiling length, my folded jaws and curled wings. Wait a second. Wings? What wings? Xol didn't have any wings. And from what we can tell of the god-turned-inside-out windsock turned ship/throne world, Akka didn't have wings either. What about the other worms? Creepy Miss Creeperton has blights on Io that chant their name still. Although, this is all except for Akka. Rip Windsock Worm. What happens now that Xol is gone? Or is he? He disintegrates after we battle him in front of Rasputin. Also, was he always there under the ice of Hellas Basin? Some answers we have. Others are going to continue to be a mystery for a while longer. But let us discuss what we do now know about the worm gods.
Before we jump into the information and thoughts the community had about worm gods, however, let's have a quick chat about this week's Lost Lore. All right, so what are you guys thinking for Lost Lore this week? You guys, I was going to say there was someone that asked something in chat, actually, if you don't have something.
I'm going to say if we want to do that, that's fine. I was going to go with like the Books of Sorrow and such like that, but that's fine.
Well, I think I saw earlier in chat someone had mentioned the fact that worms are not the same as the hive. And I guess someone had made a comment about that's not, for some reason, that's not like super common knowledge.
Right.
I
think that's a good thing to talk about.
I think that's an easy thing that we can talk about quickly too, right?
Yep.
Right.
It leads back to actually what I was saying
cool.
Anyway.
Hey, that works even better. So in case you didn't catch it, the worms are not the same as the hive.
Nope.
They are the reason that we actually have the hive. Yeah, I'm done. That was a pretty easy Lost Lore, right?
So the worms were
Sorry,
not.
I didn't mean to be. I don't mean to be like an.
As
butt
far as
about
we
it,
know,
but
the introduction of the worms comes in the Book of Sorrow, where the three sisters dive down in the needle ship, and the Leviathan warns them about the things in the deep, or warns them not to go too deep, essentially. And what they end up finding is kind of the worm gods and the worm larvae, what is it called? A familiar.
The white
king.
worm. Yeah, the
white
larva.
Worm,
And the Leviathan ends up eventually dead and eaten by two of the worm gods. They essentially make the deal. That might be a good place to start.
The Faustian bargain.
The Faustian bargain with the hive.
Real quick, what I also want to kind of point out too is there's a little interesting correlation between the description of so everyone also let me kind of back up. Everyone attributes the hive to a very vampiric race, and there's an interesting connection in the fact that the familiar that the Ossium King has is called the White Worm. It's actually I don't know if you would call it a short story, but it was a short novel that Bram Stoker actually wrote called The White Worm. And for those who might not know where I'm going with the connection there, Bram Stoker is the one who kind of put Dracula on the map as far as major vampiric mythos back in the day. So there's just like a weird little interesting trivia connection there that I've always find kind of interesting. But yeah, okay, so worm gods, first thing we hear about is them in the Books of Sorrow. We hear about them. And obviously they're on Fundament, right? It's actually kind of we're led to believe that the reason almost that Fundament is around is kind of because it kind of feels like they're being kept there as prisoners. Would you guys agree with that assessment?
Different races to, or at least that's what they claim, is that they've been calling all of them there.
Right. And they're searching for, the ever elusive perfect host, I guess you would say. Right. And you see that with the sisters and the worm gods in this kind of bargain that they make. And the reason we call it, or that I call it, a Faustian bargain is because even as you're kind of reading this, and obviously, we're reading this, we know the end of the story. The hive kind of get the short end of the stick. And I mean, they get immortality in a way, I guess, but at the same time, it's not really the best version of immortality.
Yeah.
So so that's the Faustian bargain, for those who are not familiar with that term, actually comes from a poem. I think it's just Faust, I believe, if I remember that off the top of my head.
It's Faust.
Faust. In which a individual makes a bargain with a devil who goes by the name of Faust, and I believe it is for knowledge in the actual story, but it ends up not going exactly well, as you can imagine. Making deals with devils, it's not probably your wisest decision to do. And so, yeah, and that's where the term Faustian bargain comes. It's basically you make a bargain, and at first it seems like it's a good idea, and it doesn't tend to turn out that great. Mm-hmm. So, do you guys want to, Beard? I know you've done a video on the. Have you done the video on the actual worms, or did you just do the one on Xol?
Oh, I've done it on Xol.
I've done it all.
On the originals, yeah.
Okay.
I've actually covered multiple angles at this point.
Okay. I was going to say, do you want to kind of did I miss anything that you are like, blue, seriously?
That kind of covers everything that I can think of. It's just to remember that the Hive and what we've seen of Xol, they do seem like they've taken up similar aspects. It does seem like each of the Hive do still look their own way, I guess you could say, is the best way to put it. But again, they've kind of picked up these aspects, but they've also been around for possibly millennia. At least we've realized that it is more than millennia. We are not sure of an exact time on age of the worms. We are also not sure of time on how old Oryx and all of them have been. Right. I have always at least thought that it is somewhere in the vicinity of at least 25,000 years. But if there is any credence to the Hive underneath Mars, underneath Hellas Basin showing up before that, it could be somewhere more in the area of billions.
Right.
Which is why I think that is such an important time period to figure out, because it could actually give us more of an idea of when most of this stuff kind of starts between the Hive, the worms, and so on. That is a big key component to figuring out a time period for most of really when all of this kind of starts, or when it really does come to a head with the Hive going against the Traveler.
Okay.
And we're not the first group that the Hive have gone up against. The thing that I want to kind of want to just remind people is that the Hive have been kind of sort of chasing the Traveler this whole time, but they've taken out multiple races along the way,
including their own.
Yep.
Yeah.
At least so
I guess that's,
so we think, yeah.
Well, but I mean, so sorry. I don't mean the Hive. Before the Hive became the Hive, they were a race that was known as the Krill. That's the name that they gave themselves in the Books of Sorrow. And there's a period at which in the bargain that they make with the worms, the worm gods, they basically become host to the offspring of the worm gods. Mostly it's Yule, which I know we'll probably get into in a bit. But so they are literally becoming possessed. They become a symbiotic host. It's not necessarily
It's not possessed in the I take over your mind though necessarily. It's they become beholden.
Yeah, and honestly though, I don't know, because sometimes it feels like it might actually. We'll get into that in just a second. Because what I was going to say is the actual first kind of war that they really engage in is a holy war on Fundament. They're basically tasked with, you are going to convert you're going to convert people to the cause of the worm gods, and if they refuse, you kill them. And they do. That's how they recruit their forces within the hive. And the thing that I always find fascinating about that whole story is the fact that at the end of it, right before they escape Fundament, this kind of gives you an idea of how populated Fundament was. The Hive's army that escapes, or well, not even that escapes, the Hive's army that existed before their escape from Fundament was only 2% of the population on Fundament. And now granted, they were a very formidable military force, because the way that they escape was they managed to they performed a slaughter at a location called Kaharn Atoll, and it was through that slaughter and the sword logic that they learn, or basically I always kind of see it as blood magic, but basically they gain enough power through the slaughter that the worms are able to escape the orbit of Fundament. They're actually able to kind of carve their way through space. But I mean, I go back to the fact that this whole thing happens, and they've only converted 2% of the planet before they just get up and leave. And then they shortly proceed to go to war with the who is next? The cephalopods, the Amnonites, I believe was the next.
The Ammonites, yep. Yep, part of the Ecumene.
Yeah, Vex 1.0. What?
Yeah.
But yeah, so Green, I didn't mean to cut you off, but what were we? So what did you have about the worms?
I don't even remember at this point where I was going.
Fair enough. Okay, I don't. To be fair, neither do I. I'm trying to think. So war has always been a present in the Hive, which is, for most people that shouldn't come as a giant surprise. And that kind of stems from the directive, I guess you would call it, that kind of gets passed down to them in it's really hard to talk about the Hive without bringing like theology and religious connotations into it, because they kind of are. They worship the worm gods. I mean, it's right there. They worship them as deities. And insofar as that what that translates into is whatever they get told is, bespoken to them from the worm gods is basically holy text. And, it's their moral directive, I guess you would say, to do. And so one of the big components of the worm gods from the very beginning is this concept of what's called sword logic. And this is a hairy topic.
My dogs are really upset about the sword logic.
I don't blame them. A lot of people are upset about sword logic, mostly because it's really difficult to explain what sword logic is.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think Toland does a pretty bang-up job, or at least comes close to it, but it's still not entirely explained or easily understood what everything or what every element goes into with sword logic. The easiest emphasis that he places on it, of course, is the simple concept of, like, I beat you and I basically take your power in a way. And we kind of see that with the sisters, especially when, or at least after Oryx shortly becomes Oryx, after slaying Sabathun and Zivu Arath in the Books of Sorrow. So in that regard, it's a partial taking of the idea, which is kind of why, or taking of power, which is basically the simple examples or understanding of like what the Hive kind of built themselves off of. Think of the light in the opposite realming. The light is more about cooperation and working with each other in a lot of ways, or it could be argued that it is. We don't necessarily gain our power through taking against each other. We gain our power through understanding each other. The Crucible is not a place for us to do battle. It is a place for us to understand each other's tactics and learn from each other. That is how we basically learn in that regard. The same is true of our technology, where a lot of it is actually gained through understandings of the light and so on, which the Traveler gave us the ability to understand. That's where it all kind of comes from. It stems from a matter more of taking than it is of giving, which is the base idea with sword logic as a whole. But again, I think Tolan does a fairly good job of breaking down how it works. It's still not perfect, but it works. He also didn't know everything. Mm-hmm. We kind of have a bigger picture thanks to the Books of Sorrow, and he theoretically did not have that script before he went to fight Crota. So I think he does a pretty good job with that.
Can we distinguish the sword logic between the Hive sword logic and just standard evolution? Yes.
I think that's an excellent point.
Mm-hmm. I gotta say, if you start talking about something like cosmic law or otherwise, that's very fair.
Well, I think it's more even kind of sorry, not to cut you off there, just real quick. I think it's more about like a lot of people ascribe sword logic to Darwinism, and
survival of the fittest going
right, and to a degree, it's a gross oversimplification of sword logic, because sword logic, to kind of go into the philosophy a little bit, sword logic isn't just. I mean, yes, to put it simply, yes, sword logic is survival of the fittest. However, it's also dealing with the intent of why you are doing harm against the other. Whereas with the Traveler, and as far as we know, because there's a lot of theories about, is there a good and evil necessarily in Destiny, and there's really good points on both sides of that argument, to be fair. But as far as the darkness and the sword logic go, the intent is to have what's usually what I refer to as an egocentrical gaining of power, whereas the power of the light and the power of the Traveler, at least as far as the Guardians are concerned, is more of an allocentric. It's more about we become more powerful when we team up, whereas the Hive really focus on I am the sharpest blade. I am the sharpest blade, not we are. We are not the most powerful. It's me. And I think that's really the distinction, and it's a very fine line. It's a very, very delicate difference, because it's all about the intent. It's all about the intent. And I think that's where, when we start talking about like Darwinism and extreme Darwinism and stuff like that, it's yes, but you can make the same argument for the Guardians, to really be honest. The Guardians also participate in a form of logic, because the other thing is, if you look at sword logic as, anyone who's played an RPG, right? You beat the goblin, you get experience points, and after you beat a certain number of goblins or whatever, whatever system you're playing in, after you beat a certain number of enemies, you level up. Well, guess what we're doing in the game? When you run strikes, when you run against Crucible, you gain experience, you level up. And that is a form, and I'm going to dodge Damo because I can feel his wrath right now. That is a form of a logic of the sword, but that is not the sword logic that we see with the Hive, in my opinion. Because again, the intent is to not. It's not. I don't want to say malicious, but it's not as dark.
Well, even in Crucible, even though we are killing each other and gaining experience points during that, it's not necessarily a sword logic, because we are working together as a team to accomplish a goal together. The only Crucible type I would say that maybe is slightly sword logic-y is Rumble.
Which, it's interesting that you say that, because Rumble is also the one that you have the least amount of light to use. If you look at it that way, it's almost you're running at a severe disadvantage because you're using light as in the form of sword logic, and it's you're hampered by it. If you want to kind of explain Rumble in a lore sense, that could be actually you actually could have just touched on the reason why Rumble is the way it is. It's because we're not using our powers the way they should be.
Should we start answering some of the? I mean, that's kind of
Shay,
a good
chat. We're just obeying the Crimson Eye.
God. There's your dark. Is that
Dark Tower? Dark Tower reference.
So.
The Crimson King. No, Farson needs to just die. Anyways,
can we talk about this whole Pete's dragon aspect and how the worms are not really flying dragons?
Aren't they?
They're just big sandworms.
They're windsocks.
They're sandworms. They're dune sandworms.
Yes, see,
Look,
that
if we're going to start talking about spice, I'm going to have a problem here.
Spice must flow, Beard. The spice must flow.
During the mission where we kill Xol, it gets all green and fuzzy spicy in the outsides of your vision because Rasputin's a jerk face and calls him to you.
I mean, she's not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The spice must flow for the worms to come.
Yeah.
Look at it this way. At least we didn't have to face a man-worm thing that had psychic powers. Okay.
At least we didn't have to face Sting.
That's even more. Actually, that's a very even better point.
Sting and his really bad haircut. I feel the grizzly coming out. Let's move on into, do the worms have wings?
So
do they have wings?
Obviously Yule does, because he's honest, and we all know that worms are completely and utterly honest and don't lie or anything.
There's a difference between lying and telling the truth. There's a difference between lying and not telling the truth.
Yes.
Because lying, you can tell the truth and not be honest.
And omit.
It's like sales.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Good. I like that one.
Oh my goodness.
I was actually going to say, what that kind of seems to me to kind of point out is that the worms have all evolved to look different.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's again maybe a hint that not all the worms are the same. And it wouldn't by any means. It's not a huge stretch of the imagination to see an enemy race of different types. I mean, look at the Cabal, for example.
Right. True.
And
that is true.
If you just kind of refer back to draconic mythology, you have different genotypes, I guess, or phenotypes. Phenotypes, I think, is the proper term for that. Within the same classification of, this is a dragon. Oh, really? Well, it looks like a giant land snake, but it's a dragon. Right. It's a dragon from China.
Right, but even a lot of the I guess dragons from China don't have wings at all.
Nope.
Okay.
Eastern dragons tend to not have any wings. They will tend to have at least 4 feet. Some of them have more, but it's generally it's
they're really
usually
spread out.
They're usually much more salamander-like. Which actually is a Western variant of a dragon, is a salamander, and salamanders don't have wings either. There are some, and then you have wyverns. Like, wyverns don't have they only have wings, or well, technically they have 2 legs, but So I mean, even within the Western mythology, you have a drastic difference within the phenotypes of dragons.
And if size is an indication of power, Xol was significantly smaller in circumference, I guess you could say, unless Aka got stretched out. I can't. I don't even know how to go about talking.
I can't.
We broke blue.
I'm not gonna edit it because it's really funny and it's completely safe.
It's true. It's true too. It's like a legitimate comment that contributes to the conversation.
Chat's like, oh god.
Hey, there's much worse things that I could say.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Regarding...
Nope.
Nope. I'm going to type it into chat, and you guys carry on.
All right.
And
That's fine.
Blue
I
will try
understand.
not to break. I kind of... I can see where that argument actually does have a bit of it holds water, because you also realize that Xol describes himself as holding fecund cities. Like he portrays himself as being this vast creature, and then again, Green, you're right. Xol does not have cities growing on him. Akka is the size of a ship, which is still, that's immense, but the power, the more powerful. You kind of see that in the Hive in general too, right? And it's, again, not just the Hive. You see that with the Fallen. You see that with the Cabal. The Fallen is all based around how much ether they've consumed, which is the importance of the Elder Cipher and all that. You have the Cabal being... I don't really... Do we ever get an explanation of why certain Cabal are larger? Is it just the morphs? Do we ever get I want to say it's something with the gas, but I can't...
Nothing's super clear that I know about.
I know that the morphs... because you have the Colossi, and then you have Centurions.
If we're talking generalized theory of power... it's even seen today in politics. The taller, bigger people tend to be in power more easily. So it could just be a matter of literally they're the biggest ones out there.
All I hear is that Green does not have a future in politics.
No. But I am good at other things. I tend to actually disagree with a lot of politics.
If Calus was in charge, you'd be fine because he was okay with music. So there's always that.
Calus was also a glutton, so there's
for punishment.
There's always
no.
Also for being an idiot. What?
What? Beard has a strong opinion about this.
There's things that I'm surprised Beard doesn't have a strong opinion about, but.
Going back to the worm gods, I think that
Speaking of Calus and worms, actually.
Well, we'll
get there. We'll get there.
Which way are we going to go to get there?
The interesting thing for me, to be honest, when we're talking about the size, the actual physical size, is we actually don't have descriptions of all the worms.
No.
We know we can approximate, that Xol and Akka were fairly large, especially since and actually we don't even really know the full size of Akka. We know that parts of him were scrimshawed, which, if you know what a scrimshaw is, that means that that's only a itty bitty piece of him. And so, and he's the Dreadnought, which, we've all seen the Dreadnought in the game. It's a massive ship. So if that's a scrimshaw of Akka, that's saying quite a that's a pretty bold statement there as well. But then you're Green, you're spot on with the whole thing of then what does that say about Xol? The other thing about Xol is Xol has been exile might not be the best term for it. But it he's been excommunicated from the worm gods. I don't
sort of,
but he's still revered, which is the interesting thing. There's still still talk about him, or they have Oryx still has a chest that's related to him.
That's true, there's the chest of Xol. There's Mormu from Destiny 1, who is in charge of the summoning pits. That's where they form ogres, so that's not a small responsibility.
No.
Which I have my own theory about that, because that ties into where we get ogres from, especially Golgoroth. Which actually, that is a good point to bring this up. The information that we got for Destiny 2 about the Worm Gods, or for Warmind especially, that I was really happy to get, was we actually got titles for all of them.
Yep.
And the titles actually make a lot of their placement within, whatever pantheon you want to describe. They make a lot of sense, especially Ears, because Ear is the one that always seemed to get in Xol's way. Because Xol, for the you have Yule, the Honest Worm, Akka, the Keeper of the Worm of Secrets, was Ever Hungry, Ear was Keeper of Order, and then Xol was Will of the Thousands.
Yeah.
And we also know from the Grimoire that Xol was very, very anti-Hive for a large part of it, because he's actually the one that sent Golgoroth to eat the Hive. And Ear is the one that kind of taught the Hive how to control Golgoroth and the ogres, and, kind of saved them in a way from Xol. And since he's the Keeper of Order, that actually kind of makes sense, if you would. He's kind of the one that was like, no, Xol, you can't eat our pets.
So talking about eating something, I actually made a boo-boo in the summary a bit. Xol was not the one who ate the Leviathan, it was Yule. Yule and
and which makes me think that is actually the second in charge, or second in command.
That's what I was wondering too.
But also, because if he's a Justicar, that would make sense too. If he's like a sheriff of the worms, which is a really weird thing. Now I have a picture of a giant worm with a sheriff's star.
Where would you put it?
On his forehead? Where else?
Right on his mouth.
That's
Open
a little weird.
Wide. Anyway, so talking about the power that the worms tend to consume.
Mm-hmm. And you also, but that also goes back into the vampiric mythos, because they are fed light. That's where they are constantly being given tribute, I guess. Which again, vampires and light as being life force, it makes kind of a lot of sense.
Well, there's that, and then there's also the fact that the different types of tribute that go to the different gods. Xol had an abundance of thrall.
Which makes,
And so it would, like Will of Thousands, his power, if the tribute line went the same direction as what the Hive tribute line tends to go, that would imply that Xol just had a bunch of little fundraisers with the
little bake sales
with the thrall. But worm gods, who was the one who gave the worm to? Was it Yule who gave the worm to Oryx?
Yes, Yule gave the worm to, supposedly all three. Of the siblings.
Which is interesting, because Yule if Yule is the head of all of it, and he's kind of almost the eventual bad guy when it comes to the Hive, as far as taking care of them. I mean, his tribute's coming from everywhere in some respects that are part of the brood.
Right, because if he's getting tribute directly from the siblings, they're getting the majority of tribute from everyone else.
Right.
And so it's just, Yule is the tippy top of the pyramid scheme that is the Hive.
If they all indeed follow the pyramid scheme. You ready for the question that I got this week that was really good, that actually made me pause a little bit?
Yeah.
Do worms follow the same sword logic that the Hive do? Do they follow the own rules that they impose on the others?
Do you want my honest opinion?
Yes.
I think they're playing the Hive like a freaking fiddle.
So you think that they don't have to follow the sword logic the same way?
I think that they have to follow. I think they have axioms to which they have to adhere for their existence. One being, we see Yule and Akka are both bound to speak only truth, especially Akka. because Akka, if Akka speaks it, it becomes true. But again, I go back to, just because I have to speak the truth doesn't mean I have to be honest. And you see all of these, I don't know. I get, it also kind of goes into the fact that I see this as a true Faustian bargain. I think that the Hive are just pieces on the board between two much larger players. And honestly, I even kind of have the feeling that the Worm Gods are pieces on the board as well. But that's kind of more of a spin foil theory on my own than anything.
What do you think, Beard? Do you think the worms follow sword logic in the same way that they impose on the others?
No, I don't think so, actually. I think it's in the same mannerism in a lot of ways, only because I think they are giving the Hive an eventual need, if you will, to carry out their dirty work in a way, just so that they don't have to. That's the best way I think I can kind of put it. But I think it is more of just a means for them to have some additional control and not have to worry too much about what it is that's going on and worry about and put themselves in danger. Granted, the worms themselves are also not very, I guess you could say, commonplace. So it's not like they're a very large grouping to begin with. So
well, the worm,
they've only really expanded their forces. So.
Well, but I would differentiate there, because I don't think the Worm Gods, like true Worm Gods, are. But worms themselves, I mean, every single hive has a worm in it. So the offspring of the worm is, rather commonplace. But I think the true worms, or, however we want to edge into that entire conversation about what are the worms and, are they deformed versions of the wish dragons?
Interesting to know whether or not the Worm Gods, the reason why they chased the Traveler, were they the original race that was met the Traveler? The worms themselves, the Worm Gods.
Well, I mean, some would argue, but, and I don't know, like, I think I might be carrying the metaphor that Destiny has a little bit too far, but darkness exists before light.
Right.
And, and there's also a really loose throwaway connection between the Worm Gods and the Formless One. Which again, tying into creation concepts, you have chaos before you have order. You have darkness before light. You have nothingness before you have something. It's kind of like that whole kind of throwaway concept there. But that all being said, I mean, it's definitely possible. It's not. That wouldn't be uncommon for the Traveler at all, because that's what happened with the Elixni, right?
Right. Which is interesting. That was another a continued route that they're going with this, that the reason why the Traveler's being chased is because everyone's gotten a piece of it, including us.
Well, either that or people want a piece of it. I mean, because again, going back to, what do the worms eat? They eat light. Well, I mean, what's one of the biggest collections of light out there? It's the giant ball egg that is filled with it, supposedly, and so, but actually what I was also gonna say, another argument for the Worm Gods not following the sword logic is the whole argument of the final shape. And that's kind of the problem that I have with Oryx, because it's like, how stupid are you? Like, and I mean that, as much as I can, or as respectfully as I can for Oryx, because when they made the bargain, I understand that the knowledge that they had when they made the bargain was nowhere close to the knowledge they had at the time of the Taken King and the Books of Sorrow. But even then, it was like, okay, we're chasing this concept of final shape. At the end of the day, if there's Oryx, the siblings, and then the Worm Gods, there's only gonna be, it's like a bad version of Highlander. There can only be one. And it's the same thing as like High School Battle Royale. All these shows that are like that. It's like these alliances are doomed to fail from the beginning, because at the end everyone knows that it's going to come down to there can only be one. So at the same time, the worm gods have been around for a long time. They know how to play this game. So why would they not instill an advantage over the people? You know, I don't know. To me, it just makes sense that they don't have to follow it. Mm-hmm. With like the final shape argument, with again they're gods. I mean, what? There's not many pantheons out there.
Oryx was also considered a god, and there are a lot of things that we have killed that are considered a god in story, and we killed it.
Right, and that's fair. And I mean, even in mythology of our world today, that just because, especially in pantheons, just because something is considered a god does not mean that it's necessarily truly immortal. I mean,
right.
Looking at the Greek pantheon. The Greek or the Norse pantheon, pick whichever one. Those gods, they were not immune to harm. Mm-hmm. I mean, the battle, the Titanmachy, was all about that. That was the whole thing. Was the Titans were threatening the Olympians, and the Olympians overthrew them because of the threat, and it was because of Prometheus. I mean, well, there's a whole anyways.
Speaking of Titanmachy, is Xol the one they was referring to when it was Rasputin saying it?
When he's talking about something eating the Black Garden.
Mm-hmm.
It's
also referenced. It's referenced to Mars specifically,
right? And that's kind of where I was about to say. It's like I really, with everything that we're kind of getting, I can see a strong case for that being the situation. But there's really not anything, there's nothing out there that's like connecting those particular dots that I'm fully aware of. But I can see that. You could
argue.
I can see it both ways, but I think I think there is a stronger case for it, especially with the presentation that we found in Warmind.
Mm-hmm.
Well, especially with the comic as well.
Right? Yeah, that's
that.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Additionally, if you go back and check through, as I talked with Green about, I think it was even last week. There's bits and pieces that may shed a little bit more light on like syntax that is in the Rasputin parts about location and so on, and especially if there is something else that would pervade Rasputin only being on Mars during the Golden Age, or able to only to extend his reach as a central form that way through Golden Age. There might be a few things that would help that theory. Yeah, that's the only thing I would kind of argue, I guess. But we're again, it's stipulation. I just like to, or speculation rather. I just like to show where there might be some connection pieces that can be found for it.
Okay, yeah, and sorry, you were breaking up there for a little bit at the end, but yeah, I think I mean to kind of to agree with Beard, I think that there is a strong case for that particular connection. I really do. I don't see any problem with that connection, but at the same time, it's an assumption. So for those of you out there who are listening to that, that's not saying that this is exactly what's the case.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be clear, it is speculation.
To show where these connections may be at that point. It's not to say this is exact, but this is why I think that it is. So
right.
easy to go back and look up like what it is that might be causing that, or cause me and possibly others to think that way. That and some of the new worm gear that we have that you acquire after beating Warmind, one of those 3 helmets.
That's right.
Yeah, those parts also kind of play into a little bit of it.
Well, and kind of bringing that into the conversation as well as the Apocrypha web lore, right? I mean that also presents again, kind of what we were talking about with the Let's Chat episode about the retcons and how, you know, it's a clarification and alteration insofar as it basically confirms that, excuse me, it confirms that the Books of Sorrow are not 100% accurate, I guess, which you know,
we've always suspected,
right? I mean,
because
but it
literally a line calling it out.
Well,
but there's some
that
have taken it as absolute like fact,
right?
Versus more like the Pirates Code, where it's more like guidelines anyway. You know,
it's more like guidelines.
There, I made
a Disney reference. I'm so proud of you.
You know what? It was a pretty hard one.
Did you miss mine? Did you miss mine?
No, I understood it. I got it. I just wanted to let it go and just not comment on
it. Did you just raspberry at me?
Sure did.
Did you raspberry at me over the internet, sir?
Yes, I did. Deal with it.
Oh, man. You know what we should talk about?
I don't know, how New Monarchy's terrible.
Moving on, we should talk about how Xol was under the ice on Mars.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, honestly, I'll defer to Beard on this one because I actually haven't had a chance to really dive into this particular piece of it, and I know he has, because, you know, timelines.
There's still some theories. I know there's a couple things that kind of have been explained a little bit further, though.
There's one card that calls it out. From one.
Well, I'm going to say we have Nokris, who had actually said that he was going to Mars, and that was his claim that he told Xol right away. So there is that piece right off the bat. Additionally, though, there are a couple of other things that are kind of said in passing, and unfortunately it is stuff through like escalation protocol that you don't hear as easily showcased, I guess is the best way to kind of put it. Sort of these finding the lore segments are unfortunately a little tricky to find, especially on an event that needed some adjustment. But the biggest thing that was also said, I think if I remember near exactly, was how Rasputin actually initiated a protocol that caused Nokris and Xol to actually be frozen, which does indicate that they were there either immediately or otherwise, but Rasputin was aware of them. And then through the course of some actions, which we are still not necessarily 100% sure to my knowledge, we end up finding, of course, that they are freed of their icy prison, as some may say that way. But again, we are not sure how 100% it is, or what exactly had led to them avoiding or getting out of their out from underneath the glaciers. So that's the thing that's still kind of up in the air, is like how it happened. But we do know that it seems like either they were the catalyst or the cause of the collapse in some way, or there were a couple other reasons that kind of pushed them to being noticed or known to many by Rasputin. And we are still kind of, I think we don't have everything just yet in that regard. That's kind of where I'm leaning this.
The other thing too that it points out is this might also answer the question about the exos, right? If we sync up the timeline, you know, there's always been the question: what were the ancestors so scared of that they created the exos to be the machines of war? And you know, if the Hive were, you know, known, then that might have been a military compulsion. Because you know, we also have the theory that there wasn't necessarily a narcissistic or a military reasoning behind the exoscience program.
I gotta say we had an idea that way, but then you and I came up with our spin foil concept from the other week,
right?
Which I still kind of fall back on a little bit further.
I do as well. I think you know, not just because it's an excellent theory made by two brilliant people, but Also, because it just no, but I mean, I think there's a lot. There's still admittedly a large number of gaps to be filled in. But if that timeline holds water, then that might explain some of the events, at least from the Golden Age.
Right. Well, and as they also say on the Shadow Trespass, one of the last lines talks about how humanity is just looking for means in order to expand its knowledge or to show how great it is, and in some cases that isn't always the bright part. Excuse me, bright parts.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Lost in Space, right?
Right. Right.
But yeah, so I don't know. Green did that.
Yeah, it does. I think that's a good. It doesn't answer it because we really don't have an answer, but it's a good way to at least address it.
Okay. Here's a really good question from chat. From Dino, why did Oryx not wake up Xol, his god? Because we do see Oryx's shade was on Mars, and Dino says, like, I could see him noticing Nokris and just being kind of like, oh, you're here. But Xol was, supposedly his god. I think because, again, kind of going back to it, Xol was not Oryx's god. He was part of the Pantheon. I mean, but that's like, Yule was his ultimate patron. I don't know if that would be necessarily the right word. I mean, Yule and Ear seem to be more involved with the siblings, to be honest.
Yes.
And Xol, and to kind of back that up, Dino, as well, even if Xol was his god, that's like an ancient Greek finding the resting place of Hades. They're not going to go poke him, because Xol was the one, again, that tried to eat them constantly. He was always sending stuff to hurt them and to I mean, I guess you could say it, test them, but...
To also be fair with the doggos in the background, the shadows of Oryx, were they...
The shades, They're echoes.
They're echoes. They're not Oryx himself, so...
Right.
Maybe, I mean, who knows how much he can actually... information he can glean from those echoes?
Right. I mean, I guess even if... I mean, that's also a very good point. But I mean, like, I just keep seeing it as, like, in terms of, well, okay, so Dino's also responding in chat. He said, why not murder Xol? Go for round 2, because he killed Akka because I don't know, because at the time he was also fighting a war with us already at that point. And, even as powerful as he is, fighting a war on 2 fronts is never a really strong tactical decision if you can avoid it. But also I keep kind of going back to this idea of, like, in a pantheon form, you always will see, the preferred god, the patron god. I kind of see Xol as the equivalent of, like, a Thanatos figure, and not in the cheap Marvel way, not in the Marvel sense, but in like the Greek sense. He's not the personification of, like, evil, but he's not someone that the Hive were like, oh, they praised him out of fear, if they praised him at all. And it wasn't like Yule or Ear I can see being kind of like almost more of a, I want to say it's more of a guardian angel type figure. But Xol is, I mean, again, I kind of go back to this idea that Xol was kind of like the Hades or the Thanatos figure. He was, despised is a bit of a strong term, but avoided unless they absolutely had to.
Which they avoided Nokris because of necromancy. Like, they looked down upon.
Yeah, and I think that actually is a good segue into the conversation about, are the Hive or the Worm gods Akka and Xol, are they actually gone? Or, because we do have this idea of necromancy, which a lot of people kind of are like, well, isn't that what the Hive do anyways?
They hide their soul.
Yeah, they actually are using a phylactery, which means that they're hiding their souls. So in technical terms, the Hive aren't actually dying. Whereas necromancy would imply that the soul, necromancy in general means that the soul is departed and they are being ripped out of whatever afterlife they, exist in and being brought back. Whereas if you hide your soul, it's never going anywhere because you've hidden it.
Mm-hmm. Could that be a reason why Oryx wouldn't necessarily mess with Xol? And the fact
It could
that
be,
Xol,
yeah.
Xol's not necessarily the most powerful, so he's going to try to, by whatever means necessary, gain an edge with the help of Nokris with this whole necromancy bringing somebody back from the dead type thing.
And then Black Flag makes a really good point too. That we see the echoes and the shades after we've sent Oryx back to his throne world.
Right.
So and that kind of goes back to, again, war on two fronts. He's already gotten his hand slapped pretty hard, and he's probably he's losing his sources of tribute. His power is being severely deteriorated as that whole thing happens. So I can see him being like, okay, well, I'll mark it on my map, and once we get done with this threat, we'll circle back and annihilate it.
So is Xol dead?
As a person who plays games, I really would be surprised if he was. But I'll be honest, I can see an argument for either way. It just, I think, depends on. I think that, to be blunt, I don't think so, because I think that as easy as it was to put Xol down, I really would be surprised if we don't see at least a nod of some kind to the power that he had.
Also,
was it easy to, though?
Yeah, whether or not we put him down.
After I got over the idea of trying to ride him like a sandworm, it was pretty easy.
Well, we had to have Rasputin's help to do it, though.
Oh, no. Yeah, right. I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, in terms of gameplay, like, not ignoring the lore of the actual mechanics that happened. Like, in terms of gameplay, we didn't even get a raid. It was literally a story mission.
That might be because of Calus.
Well, I mean, right. But I mean, at the same time, though, you had the situation with Oryx, which a lot of people bring up. You had a 6-person raid to take out Oryx, who supposedly is below them, and
which took Akka and beat Akka.
Right. And so, I mean, and Akka is arguably more powerful than Xol.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I can see it. I can see from a mechanic standpoint and from a story standpoint, I can see both cases being actually pretty strong.
The other thing is Xol disappears. He dissipates. Akka is still around. I could go run around on the
but does he?
Inside version.
Because last time I checked, we're wearing pieces of him.
Are we wearing pieces of him, or are we wearing pieces of? Because I could tell you that helmet I'm wearing is not the size of the thing I fought.
No, but if you scrimshaw it could be.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I mean, think of the Ahamkara bones. I mean, the Ahamkara bones are itty bitty. They're not very big, we don't know. Right? Fair point. I was about to acknowledge that we don't know that they are the same. But I mean, again, I kind of go back to the use of the term of scrimshaw, which is basically when you carve a bone down very carefully and very very finely and make a very small figurine, usually out of whalebone is actually what it used to be. Mm-hmm. But the point there being is, like, even like in reality, a scrimshaw of a whale is, I mean, they're often not very big, especially like really nice ones. They were totems. They were keepsakes for whalers. I mean, so they weren't that big, but they came from whales. I mean, sperm whales, for example, were some of the best scrimshaws out there, and those whales are big enough to take out the boats that they would. I mean, go read Moby Dick for instance. That is actually a pretty accurate glimpse into that whole world, I guess you would say. Obviously, there's not an Ahab, but I mean, I guess my point there is, like, I kind of got the feeling that the piece of armor that looks like a giant bug butt is actually part of Xol.
That's not the image I needed to know that I am wearing.
You're wearing it on your head.
I mean,
that's the Luke Smith comment about Oryx, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
You're welcome.
So can we move to Calus and his connection to them?
I mean, you didn't even get to hear my spin foil theory, but that's fine.
No, do your spin foil theory.
Yeah, no, do it. I think we have enough wiggle room with the worm gods, to be honest. That, I mean, spin foil is actually just as legit.
At this point with them, yeah, as in some rights, terrible as that sounds, it's
I like the fact that I got to use the word wiggle room with worm gods. I mean, I'm pretty happy with that.
Yes, I totally understood the pun. It was not lost on me, trust me. I just, like Green's comment on Disney references, decided to move past it.
Just trust in me, it's fine.
I decided to dig a hole and get under it or something. I don't friggin' know.
Guys, spin foil before Beard goes on.
Oh no.
Worm gods are Ka.
Oh god.
Trust in me. Or Ahamkara.
I think we might actually break Beard. But yes, actually, now that that's stuck in my head, I can see that totally. The hypnotic eyes.
You know what? I don't care anymore. Green, New Monarchy is the worst ever. There is nothing else that comes close to it. The Concordat should be brought back into the tower as a better reference for who I would care about working with.
See, this cracks me up. This cracks me up because I say this really legitimate Disney reference, and what you throw at me is your faction stinks.
Nope.
I love you.
Yeah, okay, sure, whatever. Anyway.
So, spin foil.
Yeah, so what I was going to say. Now I've completely thrown off my own brain here. I have a feeling that both of them are dead. And I know that's going to probably garner a lot of hate.
I mean,
that
like
being
I said,
said,
I can see the argument.
Yeah, I mean, from a gameplay standpoint, if I'm looking at it from somebody that's trying to craft out different stories or do different things, then per that point, I'm looking to get rid of characters and kind of quiet out some of the others and move on to some others that may be a little bit more intimidating than I may have actually had before. But I do find reason to believe that they are more dead than they are alive. I understand the reasonings behind them being alive with things like throne worlds and such like that would possibly exist, but we are unsure if both this worm god and Nokris would have had them, since they don't seem like they follow the same tactics, goals, etc. They seem to kind of do their own thing or fit into their own right. Additionally, Nokris followed some different standpoints than what we had with Oryx and the rest of the brutes. And I'll get there in a second on why I think that the brute that Nokris has is not his own. But overall, it really does feel like the concepts that Nokris and Xol were working with were completely different than what we had or what we've dealt with from Hive previously. They were working with resurrection more than they were dealing with the ideas of who can actually work with or stay alive the longest. And that's, of course, what Xol was trying to avoid, was the inevitability of his own demise at the hand of the other worm gods, because he deemed himself as one of the weaker ones, or at least so we assume. He also deemed himself as just needing help or needing something else. That being said, if he was not as powerful as the other worms happened to have been, then this would just lie into the fact that he wasn't that powerful and may not have had something like a throne world. But again, this is just a speculative idea on Xol himself. Nokris, on the other hand, is dealing with powers that he had to study through books and other arcana that were otherwise collected by different means, be it from different civilizations that were otherwise conquered by Oryx or something else. But along came a spider, if you will, and basically said, "This is how things should go, and this is how I
come
would
into
like."
my parlor. Come into my parlor.
Yes, come into my parlor. But the idea that they're dead kind of stems from a couple of different things, and it comes back to one, the powers that are demonstrated by the two of them. Both Xol and Nokris don't exactly seem to be the strongest of the bunch.
Mm-hmm.
This is also kind of showcased by Nokris feeling like he needs to partner with somebody while understanding the ideas of sword logic, because let's not mince words on that. When he decided to go about this on his own, and he felt that this was the better path, it wasn't something that he was kind of forced into by another. He decided to do this on his own in that respect, and he even outlines that himself in some of the books and guides that we have, if they are to be believed. Because part of the problem that we have with the like Verity's Brow and the Worm God's Caress and the like, we don't know the validity of where they come from. We still don't know exactly like who's making those records. I have a feeling that it's Eris who's actually finding these records and giving them to us in some way. Yep.
Well, and it wouldn't be the first time we see her using crows.
Right. Additionally, though, Nokris and Xol were linked. This is something that we knew of from some of the information that's been told to us from both Apocrypha and even what is kind of said from, what's the best way, I guess, from the Worm God Caress and such like that. But the biggest thing that makes me think that we had an easier time actually taking out Xol just comes to the fact that we took out Nokris first. It had to be an order in which it was done, because I think if it was the opposite order, it may not have been possible for us to do so, because Xol had willingly given a part of himself to Nokris, and it seems that Nokris was the easier of the two to knock down, if that makes sense. Again, I think there is a little bit more, as I'm thinking off the top of my head here and not having any heavy organized thoughts or anything in front of me, I think that this is something that would kind of suggest that they're both dead more than they are alive, much to the chagrin of possibly many that are out there. But I see it from a gameplay standpoint of let's move on to another bigger, better worm god that we can think of, and I see it from a lore standpoint to say we don't have enough information to know that they followed knowing that they didn't follow the same practices as what we had with the other worm gods, that they were doing something differently, or not even worm gods, but the rest of the hive too.
Well, and then also you have kind of going back to the concept of if the worm speaks it, it's true. Mm-hmm. You know, in Nokris, or not Nokris, Xol has dictated that he is the weaker of the worm gods. Then if he speaks it, you know, it goes back into this whole thing of, you know, is he telling the truth? He might not be honest, but is he telling the truth? And that whole debate too, because I could see that being the case as well. Is he wasn't the weakest until he decided that he said it, and then you know.
You don't know that necessarily either.
Well, and that's true.
And I think that's part of the biggest problem that, of course, we're having here tonight as well, is that yes, the worm gods are still a very big portion of the story of what we have with, obviously with Destiny, but overall there isn't as much information as we would like there to be on a Hive package. But even then, Warmind is more about Rasputin, Clovis Bray, Anna, etc. It seems having the Hive there was something else that they could kind of work with It wasn't something that was, or giving us more of an idea of what did cause the collapse. That was the biggest thing.
Or,
I think
also...
it was
Oh, go for it, Green, sorry.
I think it was a logical enemy for us to have, going back into the Grimoire and find different things about how specifically underneath the sands of Mars, and there's references to things being frozen to Rasputin.
Well, there's also references to things being buried under the sands of Mars too.
Yeah,
there's I think that's a rare set of armor that mentions.
It's even in Freehold, in the card Freehold, as well as the card for Mars. There's also, with that being said, the other enemies that we've seen on Mars have been the Take, or not the Take, obviously, the Elixni, the Cabal, and the Vex. So having the Hive show up on Mars, if we're going to have kind of a battleground place for all of them to show up, Mars would also be an interesting location for many reasons.
And it also makes sense if it's the true home of Rasputin, right? Which, to be honest, what's the common thread between all the enemy races and humanity? It kind of all ties into this interest in Rasputin, and Clovis Bray's interest in, maybe them. There's a common thread there as well. And I think that maybe what you're getting at?
Kind of. That was just also one of the questions of, and I know I asked Beard this, was the Hive there underneath the Rasputin base before the Clovis Bray area was made?
Yes.
Or did they come afterwards? Because I know that's a thing that's been talked about a lot.
I think...
Yes, but here's my addendum to that. Nokris and Xol were not.
Right.
I have this very big feeling that the brood that we are dealing with, as far as like the actual combatants, are actual dead Hive. Like they died and are now being resurrected by Nokris,
who is a necromancer.
Who is a necromancer.
Yep, I'm completely on the same page as you as far as that is concerned.
I don't see a reason to otherwise think otherwise, because it would explain a couple of things. One, again, it would tie back to the idea of Clovis Bray being on Mars or being interested in Mars because of having the Hive underneath and everything. It would also give another reason for Elsie and why she needed to be turned into an Exo, and how she would not have had a life if it was not for the Exo program. Because that would end up tying back into things like xenoviruses and whatnot.
Yep.
Like exoviruses would have been a very big thing to be worried about, especially when dealing with Hive or otherwise.
Which would also explain where the xenovirus comes from if you have a lot of dead Hive.
Yep, because they're just festering, and they've got all these different diseases and such that they are otherwise carrying. They are frozen and lodged within ice and so on. I mean, look, not everything can be Captain America and survive in some ice, okay? Like, we gotta keep that in mind. Look, another Disney reference.
Right, and then, nice. I was also going to say it would explain what a lot of people are assuming is a discrepancy in the timeline. Because it's not a discrepancy in the timeline. It's it could be just we don't have the clarification, or as what we kind of talked about the other day, an alteration, or addition to the story is that we had masses of thrall underneath the ice. And then Clovis Bray kind of comes and he's like, oh, look, or well, not necessarily under the ice, but there was hell, Mars could be a burial ground for a Hive, for all we know.
Yeah. And this
could be the reason why they're pissed at us is because we disturbed, it's the sacred bury ground of the Hive, or, there's so many different directions you can go with that.
It goes to an adventure though that's on Mars as well right now. one of the last things that we know of is the Hive on Mars are calling out to Savathun.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying, return from the deep and take our power. So I'm almost wondering if this brood happens to be in some way linked to Savathun, and meanwhile, Nokris knows that they're there, and it was a failed something or other that had happened, or something else.
Just like a power play on his part.
Etc. Yep. And we don't know what the Hive are at that point, except for the fact that they do seem like they are an exo race of some kind. Like that's it. And meanwhile, Clovis Bray is sitting and experimenting on them or trying to understand them, and it all tends to go a little bit loopy and wrong, and you end up getting exos, and that's why they're called exos, is because of exoscience and etc. All these things just seriously tie back to how Clovis Bray, and at least in my mind, again, this is complete speculation, of how Clovis Bray, or why Clovis Bray had their facility set up on Mars. You can also argue it was because it was away from EarthGov a little bit more, and they could do whatever they wanted to, but that starts going into some Dead Space territory that I don't want to make myself sad about.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, and real quick to interject here, chat's talking about the ice. To kind of put this in perspective, the ice would be, yes, the ice came after Rasputin was established, because Rasputin, we know, runs the protocol to establish the ice, and I think that's where we're saying that would be where Xol and Nokris appear, because up until that point, I think, and Beard, correct me here if I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, but I think what is being said is that up until that point, it was just a burial ground of a ton of thrall. Whereas when we see the flash freeze of the area, that was Xol and Nokris making this power play, power grab, whatever it turns out it was, that creates this army, and Rasputin identifies it as the threat that it is, and then calls the protocol that freezes the place.
And that protocol happened back in Dark Below, didn't it? That's when that one when we got the card for it.
For the flash freeze one?
There is actually an escalation protocol. I would have to look up what it is, and I know somebody can tell me what it is. But there is actually a protocol name that Anna has given, that Rasputin had employed, that needed to happen for the collapse to basically happen. And it also kind of piles into a different mindset.
Siberian entropy.
Okay, there it is. Yeah,
Thank you, Dino.
I forgot to write that down when somebody had said it. But that would that to me was where Rasputin knew he needed to enter into the collapse and basically enter, or at least to shut down his systems and overtake the hive or the brood of Nokris, if it is Nokris's brood, to ensure that they do not cause any hassles or issues for humanity. Now, granted, again, there are still some pieces that need to be talked about in terms of the Warmind fragments and this, that, the other thing, but the base idea, at least to me and how it reads, would suggest that Nokris and Xol did cause the collapse, but they had to be frozen before they could be taken, before their plans could really be put into full fruition.
And honestly, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, and honestly, that also explains how Rasputin is able to nicely tie up Xol so that we can pop him in the chin. If he's been spending this entire time researching this one worm god, there you go. There's an explanation on why he can neuter him so fast.
He's not only been researching this worm god, but the Clovis Bray facility has tanks of the. We were joking about spice earlier. Tanks of that stuff.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, that's what I mean is like, it's not the first time that we've seen Rasputin fragment himself. You know,
No.
And that would be, again, to kind of dive into a little bit of Halo trivia there, it wouldn't be the first time Bungie has played with the idea of an AI splicing itself apart to deal with multiple problems at the same time. And it makes sense. Yeah, Cortana does it Cortana did it all the time. It's one of the there's an argument that that's why she's able to do as much as she is, and there's a reason why she's not going rampant as fast as she was supposedly supposed to. But I mean, at the end is what I'm saying is, like, just because Rasputin shut down all his core, like his major functions, it doesn't mean that there wasn't a subroutine somewhere running research and collecting tanks of the stuff and all this other things that we're talking about. And it just, to me,
or a submind.
Well,
yeah,
not even
or
that.
some mine. But I mean, to me, it just makes everything kind of fit nicely together, and to be honest.
What else did Rasputin have under his command? Brains, constructs, things I have not seen since that day or since.
Right.
The
submines.
The Crucible logo on them.
Well, I'm going to say that's still up in the air. How that is.
It still bugs me. I want to.
I still want to
it,
ask towards like Chris Barrett and be like, are they supposed to or not? Because that would.
That has a lot of emotions.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Well, and yeah, I was just going to say, to kind of pull it back into the conversation about the Worm Gods specifically. I think that, and obviously Xol is the one that we have the most exposure to at this point. Even though we've kind of been
tromped around.
Yeah, even though we've explored the windsock that is Akka, we don't really know his story. We do see, again, the kind of the shadow of fearful respect that the Hive has for the Hive, or for the Worm Gods, insofar as within the Dreadnought there were the different chests, there were the different, we have different spawn of them. But even there, though, you also see different spawn of the siblings.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh, green.
It's just punny. I didn't say it.
It is, but it's really good, actually.
Do you want me to say it to the world?
Yeah,
okay.
That's fine. That's not the worst one that we've come up with tonight. To be fair,
no. And Justin's not here, so I have to pick up the slack. So we were talking about how Akka is a windsock. So is he a windsocka? I have that like meme face, like the doggy meme face right now.
I thought you were going with the troll face, because that would also work, I think.
Have we kind of tied up this one? Do we want to move into the Calus connection to the Worm Gods? Because this is one I actually don't know.
Sure.
Yeah, let's go. Let's talk about staring into the void.
Yes.
Beard.
It's actually been a while
and Q beard.
It's been a while since this has actually been brought up, because most of it is from the first raid, right? Like we haven't seen much of this in the raids otherwise, but we know for like bits and pieces. Well, and the other piece that kind of really helped with this was the Golden Invitation that we had from the limited edition and so on. But the pieces that really kind of connect the dots, or help to connect the dots with this one, come down to, as Blue had kind of mentioned, the idea of looking into the void. The question is more, did Calus actually work with the void? In that the void would be like the worms or something otherwise, or did he at least communicate with them to know what the end was or what was coming? Or is it something entirely 100% different than that? And it is something that he is able to just simply see, like he did with Oryx, the Oxa machine, and how the Oxa machine was able to give him a vision of how Oryx was was able to do his things throughout space and time. These are the questions that we're still kind of having right now when it comes to Calus and the worms. But there's this really strong indication, again, be it because of the Oxa machine or otherwise, that indicates that Calus is following some of the same rules of logic as what the Hive have over the course of time, in like sword logic and so on. Because he wants us to prove ourselves through power and might and so on, and he wants to do that through taking power and almost forcing people into doing what it is that he needs them to do. And this is very similar to what we talked about earlier with Toland's explanations on sword logic. And it falls back in place with how even Oryx has basically explained it. But Calus very much follows, and again, you could just say it's the cosmic law or something similar, but the idea of, well, I will spare you and your civilization if I take the greatest among you. So it's still an idea of taking power and ripping it from that civilization that was otherwise working with them.
So you're saying there are 3 ways to take power?
Yeah. There's there's a lot of different ways apparently to take power, and
as far as like 3,
solar, and void. What?
No, I mean because Toland talks about the 3 queens.
The 3 queens. Yeah, I know.
And so I was
being facetious with our powers.
Nah, you're just happy you're getting your come on Mayo wave. So don't.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like
amazing.
I didn't make a joke about it immediately after it happened.
We didn't hear the scream from across the country of pure happiness.
Oh. As an old school Dragon Ball fan, all I can say is it's about time. I will have so much fun. Anyway,
we were actually theorizing about how that would actually move, but PvP.
Well, I'm going to say I'm still up in the air how we're going to actually get those powers, and to tie it back to Calus, that again brings up a very big question. Is Calus the means for us knowing these powers, and how is it that he would understand how the light works in that regard? Is he knowledgeable? Yes. Is he knowledgeable of it because of his dealings with the darkness, and the darkness just happens to give him another inclination in how the light works? But even then, again, we know for a fact that it's not the first time that Calus has ran into the Traveler. Right. Apparently the Cabal have been researching the Traveler pretty hard, and Xol, as a side thing, kind of blames Calus for the Traveler not choosing the Cabal. Mm-hmm. It was that was kind of a forceful, or a larger forceful reason for why Xol ended up doing what he did to Calus, and then his ultimate goal of trying to take the light instead of having it offered to the species of the Cabal.
And the other thing too is it shows that the light is not as magical as people have always assumed it is, because remember what Xol is doing on Io. He's manufacturing light. He's harvesting it, and he's storing it. Like, I mean, to me, that's like it's kind of putting into an empirical sense something that up until now we really haven't seen able to be manipulated like that. Which also kind of goes through my throwaway comment about maybe Rasputin is the source of our new subclasses, because if Xol can figure out how to manipulate light, a Warmind probably can do that as well.
Exactly. And the idea that Calus is a needed entity is basically thrown out the door, simply
which will make you happy.
Because realistically, I have not seen that Calus has knowledge outside of just being a big blowhard. There is nothing that suggests to me that he actually has some powers, except for maybe he himself has ascended to a higher plane. It's great for you. Just stay there and stop bothering me, all right? Anyway, bias on Calus is definitely showing. I don't like the character that much. I really don't think he's very well developed at this point. He has too many loose threads that are far from answered even by his last raid lair. And I would really hope that one of the first missions that we have to kind of tie up his story is to basically jump on the ship and either blow it up or get it out of the system. Or at least he's like, well, this is what I've got for you. So it was fun, but I'll see you later. I'm going to go face the end now that I have foreseen that you cannot help me with. I don't know.
Well, and that also kind of begs the question too. Do you see any relation between the Leviathan and the Worm Gods and the Ahamkara? Like, do you see that as being a distant relative of those two?
I'm almost wondering if there isn't something that would be there, because they do say that it was something that was once alive, if I recall right. Mm-hmm. And because of that, that would kind of suggest or say that it may have been an offshoot or derivative thereof of an Ahamkara, Worm God, something else. But again, we don't know. With how Leviathan is kind of thrown around, and it seems like that was not purposeful to the examples of what we were given from, I forget who it was that had said it, but somebody had officially commented and had said that the Leviathan was in no way linked to the Leviathan on the in the books of
that's
Sorrow.
true. That's true. Yeah. Well, and also sorry, Green, real quick. In comment of the Leviathan, I think the Leviathan's still alive because isn't it eating?
Yeah.
Nessus.
Or is it eating or is it processing? Because the Almighty
that's
processed.
True. Okay, that's a fair.
Mercury.
Okay, I always assumed that it was eating it, but that's because it has a giant freaking Moby Dick mouth.
Right.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that's the assumption on that one. I've kind of been with you on said assumption, but it does seem like it's breaking it down.
As soon as Green did say that, I was like, oh, that's fair. That's a fair point, actually.
Yeah.
And considering it's the same race that
right. No, yeah, I'm right there. What was the other thing you had?
The other thing I was going to bring up is how if the Cabal had been studying Traveler and knew about the Hive as well, they wouldn't necessarily have the histories of the books of Sarah themselves, most likely. But do you think that there are other Leviathan-like creatures out there that they could have based the design of the Leviathan itself, the ship to go on to, based it upon? Because Calus wanted a grand...
No, but I mean, also, I thought I always assumed that it was a throwback to the land sharks that were on what I always forget the name of their planet, because there was it
starts with a T.
Yeah,
Torbital.
Yeah, I always want to say I always either want to say the turtle or Torbjorn, but neither of those is correct. I know myself well enough to not do that. But I always thought it was like one of those, or at least designed in that fashion.
Maybe we don't have enough information about.
Yeah, that was just my
that's the problem.
And I think that was mostly based off. I think it was in the Cabal booklet. There's a sketch of one of the worm things that's laying right outside of a city. And it looks just like the Leviathan.
Yep.
Well, what do we think about our revisions and our updates about the Word of God? Good? Feeling just not enough information?
I think that's where it kind of gets left. Yeah, we don't have enough to really fully comment on much new, which in that respect, obviously there's a lot of speculation that we're having, but in that regard, again, there is a lot of stuff that just needs to be further explained. And that's why I think that episodes like these are still nice to have, only because at this point we're at least able to say, well, this is our speculation piece on what is actually happening, versus us, we don't have a lot of knowledge so far on what has been happening. But
talking through it has been nice because you can start tying threads together.
Right. And even then, even if it isn't vastly in relation to the worm gods or entirely related to the worm gods, still tying back things like new recent topics like Nokris and so on are very topical and important to that discussion. Especially when, Xol himself is an obvious worm god, and we finally seen one of them or a form of them, then we've got something to finally go by here.
Well, and I know that we actually have a dispatch too.
Mm-hmm. We have a submission, an audio submission from basically Salt, who has been chatting with me pretty consistently, wanting to get into the voice acting because he's a fan of ours and of Infested Potato as well. So he made a submission as for this episode. It is, just FYI, for those of you listening with headphones, it is a little intense, is a nice way to put it. So just fair warning.
Dispatches received from the wilds.
So this is the dispatch that we got from basically Salt.
Dispatches from
Yes, Guardian. It is me. You are the honest one. I've been watching you, Guardians, part of the sky, and your slow descent into the deep. You do not realize the path you are on. You are utilizing your existence well. You have killed the Grimoires and his son Crota. You have defeated Xol, Will of the Thousands, and his disciple Nokris. You may not realize, but it is only a matter of time until you come to understand the deep. Continue following your nature, O Guardians ours.
And there's not a good way to follow that up. Because it's like, okay, creepy Yule is being creepy.
Yup.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you guys want to? Oh no, go. What is it?
I just wanted to say to anybody out there who is wanting to do any sort of dispatch, we've read things on the show as far as like emails, we've read poems, we've done all sorts of different things. We've obviously played audio clips like that. So if you are a creative type and you want to submit something, just shoot me a message either on Twitter or on Discord, and I will see what I can do. And try to keep it topical to the week, because that's something that's kind of nice. But if not, submissions for the websites are good.
Additionally, I'm always looking for some voice actors once in a while. So
Yeah.
if I can fall back on some of you guys, I would love to do that. Consider it some submissions if need be. I do know for a fact that I get sidetracked on a lot of my other projects that happen now and again. But if I could figure something out that we can do, especially with something like Guardian School being a typical thing over on my channel, then I'm sure we might be able to work something out. Just saying.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that also will help. I know a lot of people have been interested in, like what Green was saying with Salt, and I know Potatoes expressed interest in like getting into like the voice acting stuff. I think there's a number of people who are interested in. Well, that's actually a really good way to get your is it called a portfolio? For voice actors?
I'm gonna say you can do portfolio. You're also just getting more
reels,
different experience. You've got a couple extra things that can kind of go with it. Because I know, for example, Mylan over at Mylan Games had used a guy named Austin Kramer for the voice of our Exo creation. He sounded fantastic, but he was somebody that was unknown to the community prior until we ended up putting in a submission. So, just saying, I would, if I can somehow get somebody starts and it gets somebody known and there's any critique that my community or another community can offer, I would love to. I've still been looking for guest voice speakers on the show to begin with, and I'm surprised how few of
many times.
I know you have. I get that you have. Gosh,
we just need to make it happen.
Creepy green is creepy.
Creepy
Hey,
green is creepy.
hey.
That's all right. She subscribes to New Monarchy's interpretations. I understand.
And
I shoehorned it in again.
I was about to say, and we've come full circle.
Uh-huh. Took you right back to the Shire there. It's all right there, Frodo Baggins. I got you.
I'm gonna sail off into the west.
Yeah, that's probably a better place for you anyway. What?
Oh. Oh. We're teammates.
Are we?
All right. So, do you guys want to do final thoughts or shout-outs? Do you guys have any thoughts or shout-outs, Beard?
Oh, you know I've got one major one. Speaking of Mylan games. So
what? There was an update?
Oh my god. So this week in Destiny news has been amazing, right? Like we had the reveal for Forsaken, which is just giving us a teaser at this point of like what to expect from like the Awoken Homeworld and a bunch of other stuff besides.
So happy.
It's going to be interesting, to say the least. It isn't just about Kamehamehas and force powers at this point now. It's getting real. As some of you may have seen, however, more to my point on a shout out here, a huge congratulations to Mr. Mylan Games, who friend of the channel, at least by in some respects proxy of me. In one regards, he has been a chatter on here a couple of times, but Destiny Down Under and this show kind of run kind of same time, so it's a little hard to get him on.
Yeah.
But that being said, he, without further ado, was asked to work for Bungie, and he is. He is actually going to be contracted to work for them. We are unsure of the capacity just yet that he is working on, as people in lore tend to do, though. However, there's been plenty of speculation behind what he has been doing or what he is doing. I've had my fair ideas and thoughts, of course, go through my head. But the ultimate goal, I think, is to bring somebody on that has a level head about the lore and ideas and so on. I know there's been some questions about, like, well, why Mylan and not Bife? And I'm like, you can argue that and question that all day, but it is literally just to say that if Bife was offered the position, he chose not to take it. And as most things go in terms of thought processes with people or what else is going on with what they would like in life, we are all different in that respect, and Matt chose to act on it, and I wish him the best of luck.
And it's nice to know that we have somebody representing basically where we're at from our community as a content creator, who's going to be up there. It's just like Holtzman. Holtzman's working for Bungie and doing kind of the same thing that Matt Mylan working remotely and different things. Granted, neither of us, like none of us know exactly the nature of what they're doing, but
we assume
Yes.
that Matt is, of course, working on something with the
story
lore,
related.
but we don't necessarily know for sure.
Right. And
I would assume bringing somebody on like Holtzman to take care of your Crucible and PvP, etc., who has been doing it for how long, and then bringing on Matt for lore would make a lot of sense, at least. So just to carry that on a little
spin
bit.
foils for that.
Yeah, it's like I'm spin foiling about spin foil for the next spin foil chat about Matt and his spin foil job. It's what? I'm just spin foiling at this point. Don't even mind me.
So green.
Yeah, no worries. My shout out is actually more of a PSA, I guess. It's
Uh-oh.
it's not like the after school PSAs. Those were boring. This one is more of
Yeah, but don't forget your sandwiches.
we did a thing on Tuesday, Wednesday, I don't remember. We recorded
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yes.
We did a recording called Let's Chat, and it's not going to be up on podcasts that I know of, right, Blue?
No. It's like I think it came out to be like 4.5 hours.
It was us, the three of us that are here, just kind of playing the game. Blue and I were in the same area for a little while, playing the game,
she abandoned
chatting.
me.
Yes, I did, because you were not doing what I wanted you to do, and I'm kind of a control freak like that.
Or because you're a new monarchy
That's
scamp
not
or
what I
something.
was-
I don't know.
Blue did not stay on the EDZ long enough for me to get my tokens.
This is going to be a
trying to
running joke for
sabotage
the
my
next.
new monarchy, and I was on Xbox, so I was on Future War Cult. So your theory's all just thrown out of the facts.
Science.
Instead of factoids, it's facts. But we recorded that. It's on YouTube. It's kind of a fun little talk about the idea of retrocon continuity or
Retroactive
thank you.
continuity.
Thank you. Redcons.
Mhm.
And it's a really good discussion about the nature of them in general, as well as talking about the major ones that have come up, quote unquote, come up in Destiny over the last couple of years. So if you would like to see that, it's over on our YouTube channel. It's super relaxed. We're playing games. You can actually see the games instead of the static image, like if you're watching the podcast streams. But I would like to ask if you guys liked something like that. I think we're kind of looking forward to doing something more like that every once in a while. Just a Let's Chat where we discuss something very broadly while we're gaming, rather than these really focused fire chats where we're diving really intensely into a topic. Just so let us know either in feedback on Discord or Twitter or on the YouTube channel as comments what you think of that. If you'd like to see more of that, that's it's not really a PSA, it's just more of an announcement. Second announcement, we won our first round. For those of you keeping track of our PvP tournament, we played right before the show tonight and won our first round, so we're moving to round 2.
We may have lost round 2 by the time you hear this.
Yes, we may have done that. Or we may have won the whole tournament by that time.
Maybe.
You never know. But I think the t-shirt for the Podclash PvP tournament, which is all the proceeds from that t-shirt, are going to go to St. Jude.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe the t-shirt's going to remain up for a while after the tournament. And I'm going to have Blue put it in show notes. It's a really cool looking... Excuse me. Oh, my goodness. It's a really cool looking t-shirt that I believe Hatchy Dave put together.
Hatchy Dave did, yeah.
And it's super amazing looking. If you would like to support the Podclash / St. Jude, you can purchase the t-shirt, or you can also just straight up donate. There'll be like a donate thing if you've already missed it. Hello, future people. If you already missed the tournament, I don't know how long that thing will be open, but we are in the month of giving for Guardian Con / St. Jude's fundraiser. So whether you're giving to this tournament or you're giving to the Guardian Con as a whole or somebody else's fundraiser for St. Jude, the community did a really, really amazing, and I'm almost cursed right there, a really amazing job raising money for St. Jude, which is actually a really good charity that actually uses the money the way that they say they're going to use it. It's not going to CEOs, it's not lining people's pockets, it's literally keeping that hospital running.
I can attest to it, as I've said a few times, because like I said, they've helped my family a lot. So anything that you guys can give to them, you can consider it a personal favor for me as well.
Yeah, so if you can give to any of those things, it would be amazing. This is a charity that I am 100% behind, and there's a few that I'm like, I'm not sure where this money's going, but this one I've donated to multiple times. If you could help in any way, shape, or form, whether you are just there supporting the streams that are doing it, or you're actually able to financially give something, that's amazing. Or even just spreading the word.
Yep. I was going to say,
It's
even
all helpful.
spreading the word, because you never know, your sharing of information could lead someone to even finding out about it. And that person could be the person that helped, I mean, it's just, yeah. Any little bit helps. It doesn't have to be a monetary contribution at all.
Exactly.
Not at all.
That's for me.
And yeah, I was going to say, we have gotten a really actually pretty good response so far from the Let's Chat. A tip for anyone who is still listening to us: if you go over to that YouTube video, I have actually bookmarked the starting point of the actual conversation inside that video, because like I said, it was us playing Destiny, so obviously it was not like a podcast where we have a hard stop or an easy beginning, and so a lot of the gameplay is still on there. I had actually offered to trim it down to, or try to trim it down to just the conversation, and I got a pretty resounding "don't touch it" from a number of people. So I was like, well, that's easy. I mean, it's easy for me. I was trying to, I was like, I can try to cut it down because it's like 4.5 hours. I don't want to make you guys feel like you have to watch it all. But I was told quite repeatedly and quite vehemently not to touch it. So it's up there.
Said,
yeah, go for it.
I will probably end up having a edited version of it.
Right. Yeah, and I was gonna say, Beard is going to be probably taking bits and pieces of it. If you guys want to look for that as well. But yeah, it was a ton of fun. We've gotten a great response from it. And I think it's just it's a nice way for us to kind of get out from behind the mics and kind of get a little bit more. Yeah, get a little bit just more of a conversation going. It's easier for that to happen. But so yes, definitely look forward to doing more of those. Other than that, if you are heading to Guardian Con next month, we'll start probably having these more often in the shoutouts. Let us know either over on Twitter or in our Discord server, so that we can be sure to try to get everyone organized.
We are totally going to be there.
Yes, we are going to be there. Beard has confirmed that he found out how to buy tickets. So
yes, he has an air flight and he has a place to stay. Now all we need to do is figure out how to get him to the airport on time.
Yes.
There's a pirate boat taxi.
Yes.
Really?
There's a water taxi.
There's a water taxi.
Ship.
Yeah. we might have offered it as a way to get Justin to come.
Oh. I thought you were going to say because there's like water snakes and everything in the swamp.
Well, there's that too, but
I mean, that would make anybody want to go to Florida, right?
You're right. Yeah, alligators and pirate taxis.
Yeah.
But we'll
right.
we're gonna probably stay around for a bit of an after show as always, and so we'll just run through a pretty basic outro, and we'll see you guys next week. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. Links to our episode archives can be found at www.focusfirechat.com. Please be sure to email us at focusfirechat@gmail.com with any comments or questions for our team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback and a rating over on iTunes as well. Also, be sure to check out all of our amazing partner podcasts within the Guardian Radio Network over on theguardiansofdestiny.com. So until next time, focus your fire and may your light shine bright.